Hey everyone, so happy Asian and Pacific Islander Heritage Month to all. And I really want to thank you all for joining our very first Cronus Apians event. Um, kind of clever spelling there. Check it out if you haven't seen it yet. And at Chronosphere, a company-wide priority of ours is to foster an environment in which DEIB becomes innate to who we are. Employee resource groups like the Chronosapiens are a way to connect our people and create an inclusive environment for everyone. And we encourage you all to join any of the ERGs that you're interested in. And also, if you'd like to start one, please do reach out to our head of employee experience, Seth Bartholomew. We hope that you find value in our events like these and take something away from them. At the end of the session, just as a quick heads up, there will be a survey available for you to provide feedback on this event. I believe it'll go out as an email. And in addition to today's session, we also have an API themed Kahoot trivia tomorrow, which is going to be at 10 a.m. Pacific, which will be hosted by Celestine and William Joe. So make sure you check that out. And now with all that said, my name's Encore. I'm one of your moderators today, and I'll be joined by Mimi and Patty. This year's theme is advancing leaders through opportunity, and we are super excited to feature our very own API leadership for today's panel interview. So quickly, just to very briefly introduce the panelists, I'll just go down the list real quick. Our first panelist will be Martin Mao, who is, of course, our co-founder and CEO. Martin's based out of Bellevue, Washington, and is of Chinese Australian heritage. Next, we'll have Joby Babu, who is, I'll go to Jan. Jan Kirschke, who is head of growth marketing. She's based out of San Jose, California, which is in the Bay Area, and is of Chinese American heritage. Next, we've got Joby Babu, who is head of customer success. He is based out of Dublin, California, also in the Bay Area, and he is of Indian heritage. And we have Trisha Feldman, who is head of people analytics and compensation, and she is based out of Boston, Massachusetts, and is also of Indian heritage. Right. And next, thank you. And just a very quick view on some important data about Chronosphere here. As you can see, about 19% of employees here identify as Asian, Native, Hawaiian, or other Pacific Islander, and about 20% of our managers identify similarly. So just thought that was an interesting little tidbit there. So we want to just go ahead, and we've got a bunch of questions, really good questions for the panelists here. So we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. The first question is actually for all of the panelists. So I'll call you out sort of one by one here. But the question is, what was your path to a leadership position? And were there any challenges that you faced along the way? And so Martin, if we could start with you, that'd be great.
Yeah, happy to. I don't know how long you want me to speak for, but I'd say for me, I started in big tech at Microsoft, and I think as an IC engineer, and I think I was pretty lucky. I had a mentor. I was a senior engineer on my team who went out of his way to ensure that both had a great experience, and that I was probably learning at a pretty accelerated pace. I quit Microsoft there. Wasn't in a leadership position. I quit Microsoft there. I ended up starting a consulting company where I ran the thing. So, I guess it's one way to put yourself in a leadership position, start a company. So I did that for a little bit, and I think it was interesting because, you're responsible for other, I guess, consultants at the time and making sure that they could get paid and whatnot. And then I ended up back in the US working for Amazon, actually, that my mentor at Microsoft had switched over to Amazon, worked for AWS, worked on the EC2 team, and they just happened to have a huge reorg. And he was looking, and like all of the senior engineers were taken, or I don't know, moved to different teams. And he was left to run a huge part of EC2 with, I think, like 5 junior engineers. And he asked me whether I'd want to come back and take like a technical leadership position. I didn't want to manage at the time. So like technically lead a portion of EC2, which seemed like a great, opportunity for me. So I came back and joined him in that, and we ended up shipping a bunch of I guess, EC2 management services like systems manager and things like that there. So this was my first sort of technical leadership position. And then ended up transitioning over to Uber because Rob, our co-founder, was there, and it was a good friend of mine from Microsoft, and he convinced me to join. And also I interviewed with Matt Mihik, our head of engineering here. And you know, in I think a 40-minute interview, I was like, damn, this person is really smart. I really want to work with them. So I ended up at Uber, working with Matt there, and ended up going down the management path there at Uber, ended up managing a few teams along the way. And then of course we left and started Chronosphere. I'd say any challenges you face along the way, you know, definitely a ton of challenges along the way, perhaps a lot of imposter syndrome, whatnot. You can imagine, I think I was 25 when they made me a tech lead of a bunch of services in EC2 and whatnot. I don't think there were any challenges that I personally experienced that I felt that, you know, they were due to the fact that I was Asian in any sense. And I think probably pretty lucky there, Asian Australian. So, you know, I speak with a funny accent, but it's an Australian accent. So I don't know, you know, it's a different type of reaction that I get, I guess. But you know, there were definitely a lot of challenges. I don't know if there were that many that were you know, due to my race, luckily, and I think I've had a pretty lucky run at it. So
Great, awesome. Thank you, Martin. Appreciate that. And we'll go over to Jan. Same question for you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So I started my marketing career in high tech. So I've always been in high tech. More years than I tend to count. I did count them up as I was writing this, and I'm not going to repeat the number because it's bigger than I anticipated or remember it being. But I started out as a marketing communication specialist in a small semiconductor company in the Bay Area, and really was doing a little bit of everything there. And I continued to work at startups over the next several years and really kind of cut my teeth, if you will, because that gave me the opportunity to learn and grow and do a lot of different things that were probably outside of my marketing specialist or really early on career. I eventually landed at a company called Data Domain, which was a backup company back in the day that eventually got bought by EMC and then Dell Technologies, which is where I spent the majority of my career. And at my time at EMC is when I kind of entered in and was given the opportunity, honestly, by one of the new leaders to really start building out a demand generation team for the business unit that I was in. And from there, I took some time off to be a full-time parent because I thought I needed some time to recharge. I had 2 kids. I still have 2 kids at the time, and then eventually figured out that I got very bored after about 1 year, and I started doing some consulting. And by the way, kudos to all those full-time parents out there. Obviously, none of us are, but it's a super hard job, and I thought it's much easier to come back and work full-time in a company than be a full-time parent. And so that, and then eventually it led me back to some consulting and startups, and came here to Chronosphere and have continued to grow the team and learn and be super excited to be a leader within Chronosphere. As far as challenges that I face, I think similar to Martin, at least I wasn't aware of any challenges that I faced of being Asian kind of in the work place. I think the biggest challenge that I probably faced was that I was much younger than many of the other leaders back in the day, and I was a woman, right, a young woman trying to build out a team and start out her career. And so I think that was the hardest part. Maybe there were challenges that I saw myself in terms of there was no one like me in leadership in many of these companies that I have talked about, the startups and even the larger companies. It was all males, right? And for the most part, they were Caucasian males in the executive leadership. And so no one looked like me. I didn't really realize it until I was much farther down in my career in a leadership position as I looked back. But I think those are some challenges that really helped build me up and put me in a position to where I am today.
Cool. Thank you, Jan. Appreciate it. And Joby, over to you. Same question.
Sure. So for me, it was a pretty smooth journey to leadership position. I'm just kidding. You've got to go through the entire rough patch I was building myself up. I also started as a programmer, around 20 plus years ago. So it kind of tells you I'm pretty young on that front. So started as a C Unix programmer in big tech, or rather high tech, back with Motorola. As a fairly good programmer for a good 7 to 8 years when I was introduced to customers and some of the customer facing functions. Kind of liked it and found it fascinating, decided to stick to that. And that transition was around 12 years or so ago. And the interesting part was the transition. It was not easy because I was an engineer by training and at heart. So everything needs to be logical. And it's like a 1 or 0 game, correct? It either works or it doesn't. There's nothing in between. So that was a big mind shift adaptation for me personally. But Man was mentioning earlier, one thing that helped me right from the beginning of my career had been mentorship. Always had mentors in my career. I either add more mentors or I changed some of them as I changed functions and responsibilities. And I had the opportunity to work across multiple geographies. I had an opportunity to work in Europe, in multiple countries in Asia. So as part of that, obviously you need to add more mentors, and that really helped me. People who gave me advices with respect to how to adapt to the working environment, how to become more sensitive from a cultural perspective as I started managing people and working with teams, etc. So that was very useful. But for me, the biggest thing was the transition that I made into the startups in the Bay Area, let's say the typical Silicon Valley startups. That was around like 7 to 8 years ago, and it was very different. It was different culturally. The pace of work, the pace of growth, the pace of even changes, that's very different. In that stream of companies that I started working with. But there was, there's something that never changed, even when I made a lot of these changes. And that is the work ethic that I always stuck to. That's something which I never compromised on. Equally important for me is very basic value system. For me, value system is like be a good human being, correct? That's extremely important. So these are two things that I never compromised on. Work hard, do the right things, be a good human. And obviously, I'm a firm believer that if you do these things right, success will follow, and you'll slowly get to your goals and objectives. Now, going to the topic of challenges that I faced, I faced a lot of them through the way. For me, for me, a little different from what Martin and Jan kind of shared. I grew up in India for the first 18, 20 years of my life, and I moved here as a student, like a lot of immigrants. And when I moved here, obviously there's a cultural gap because I didn't grow up playing baseball. I didn't grow up celebrating Turkey Days. I didn't go shopping on Black Fridays. So it took me a little bit of time to learn these things. So I had to grow a lot on the social side of the work, frankly, back in those days. And especially when in the engineering world, everything worked. But when I started working on the business side, meeting customers, working with people on the customer side, that was a huge learning for me. And hey, it's a fun part to learn of. It's a fun part of the life to learn. So it worked out pretty good for me. But apart from that, hassles that everyone go through, correct? Getting impacted by reorgs, missing annual goals, learning some things in the hard way, especially about cultural sensitivity and so on and so forth. All of them happened to me, and I made a lot of those mistakes when I started managing people early in my career, and became a manager like in my 4th or 5th year as a programmer, became a lead of the team, but made a lot of stupid mistakes back then. And I had to work with some tough customers who thought they pretty much owned me, correct? Because that's how a lot of the traditional customer management works. But long story short, sticking to the 2 basic principles that I always believed in helped me navigate a lot of these. Work hard, stick to the basics, and have a work ethic that people that satisfies you first to start with, and people cannot question you around and follow a very core value system that you believe in. And I hope, that's probably the right value system for everyone.
Great. Thank you, Joby. Appreciate that. And Trisha, we could hear from you as well.
Yeah. So the path has definitely been a bit winding for myself. At the beginning, I was truly focused on being a CFO for the majority of my career. Move it along, Adrian. But along the way, I had an experience where the company's culture was in direct conflict with my own values, and it impacted my personal life. From there, my passion redirected from how do I optimize a company's P&L as a CFO to how do I answer the question, how do I merge the operational goals of a company while also optimizing an employee's experience? And that is people analytics, and that's what I've been leading for the last couple of years. So I alluded to sharing that I had an experience, like a challenge in the past, and that was mostly, while it wasn't related to being an Asian American, a woman, a new mom, like I don't know which one of the challenges it was relating to. And I think that's the complexity that we all carry. It's who we have multiple identities and multiple faces that we bring to our teams and our companies as an Asian American. We can at least. And that's where I think having a strong core to face those challenges, knowing who you are, doing the deep work to identify who you are, to be able to be okay with this multifaceted person that you are is truly what has helped me when I have faced challenges of that nature. So it's really the ambiguity is the challenge, but to Joby's point of not knowing the traditional American ways, going home and watching Indian TV and not knowing that there was like Full House. Yeah, totally there. And I get that. And I think being a leader in this environment means that you're trying to be like available and open to all of these different experiences. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Trisha. Appreciate it. And we can go on to the next one here. Mimi, did you want to take that one?
Hello, hi, sorry. What does being an inclusive leader mean to you? So thank you. Sorry for the mute.
And I think we'll kick. Sorry. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
we're going to start with Joby here for this one.
Sure. So when I look at inclusion, the definition itself varies by circumstance and context, correct? Because there's that has very different interpretations based on where we use inclusion or where we have to be an inclusive leader. But when you look at the basics, it's pretty simple. Can you be a good listener to start with? And on top of that, if I put that into the context of a team and a company, you care for the entire, your own team to start with, you care for the entire company, other teams and people who are part of that company. That's where it starts. So, from a definition perspective, probably an inclusive leader is one who listens to all voices and includes those voices, starting with, planning anything through strategization, through execution, and even, through the final rewarding process, correct? Because it's a journey pretty much. And it doesn't start and end, frankly. I mean, it is part of operational DNA, and it got to be there. You are either an inclusive leader or you're not, or you're an inclusive person or not, correct? So this needs to become an integral part of the operational fabric itself. And many a times inclusion gets misinterpreted in different ways too. For example, it doesn't mean running the most democratic system out there, correct? No, when you do that, you usually get infected with the paralysis by consensus syndrome, pretty much. There's no decision making, everything becomes Like, everything becomes a way to have and, have everyone's buy-in and please everyone as part of that. Now, in this process, sometimes you may not be the most popular person out there pleasing everyone too. So just want to, make sure inclusion doesn't get misinterpreted that way. You have to do what's right. So, if I may put, if I may look at inclusion and make a one-liner around it, it's probably around, or it's definitely around ensuring everyone gets an equal and equitable opportunity while you define, decide, and execute, keeping the priority of the business. That's what inclusion in the context of a business or a company to me means.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
I love-
Joby. Yeah, sorry. Thank you, Joby. Yeah, and same question to you, Trisha.
Yeah, of course. So I love all of that, Joby, and echo that. For me to be like an inclusive leader who's literally responsible for reporting on our DEI data and insights, I know that I take great care in trying to continuously challenge my own assumptions and biases, because I know I have them. I don't want them, but I know and recognize I have them. And I have to seek out the diverse perspectives within our team and company, so I don't report out my own biases and like discolor the actual story. So and to do that, I have to take the time to engage in continuous learning about DI and conscious bias, which Chronosphere actually does a fabulous job on providing these learning opportunities. So that's what I think for this time, what's required of being an inclusive leader at Chronosphere.
And going along those lines, how about some more education here with some true nice facts? We have the month of May is chosen for API Heritage Month. It's Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month because it commemorates the immigration of the first Japanese people to the United States on May 7th, 1843. And May is also significant because it recognizes Golden Spike Day, which marks the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad that was built with significant contributions from Chinese workers. So a little more education there. And moving on to the next question, we're going to have Jan answer. Is there a significant event in your life or belief that has influenced how you think about being an inclusive leader?
Sure. As I was thinking about this, there's not just one event that shaped me or one belief, but I think there's two major ones, or events/beliefs that have shaped me as a person, which then obviously influences me as an inclusive leader. And the first one of those, and it relates back to the fact that you just showed, is that both of my parents grew up in the deep South of the United States. My mom's dad came to this country in the early 1900s on a boat from China to help feed and work on the railroads during that time. And he eventually was able to bring my grandmother over to this country, and they eventually, with all the discrimination that was happening in the San Francisco Bay Area, they couldn't own a business. He moved the family to Mississippi. And so many of you may not know, I grew up in the South and used to have a really thick accent, not Martin's cool Australian accent, but a really strange Southern accent for someone who looks like me. Anyways, fast forward on all of this, I think that the fact that my parents grew up in the South during kind of what they call the Jim Crow era, it was during the time of discrimination and segregation. And because of the way that my parents grew up and because they had to fight to go to, the non-colored schools, and they had to really assimilate into the culture, it really ingrained in them this belief of, you got to work hard, to what Joby was saying. You've got to make sure that you stand up and you show up every day. And it's not about what you look like, it's about what you do and what you can bring to the table is kind of one piece of that. I think the other piece of that is that it's a positive and a negative. And it really is. And I hear it through all the, the aunts and uncles and, grandparents of on my side of the family. It was, you didn't complain, right? You just did it. And there were things that happened to you. There were things that people said to you. People made fun of me growing up. And honestly, the way that my parents raised me, I didn't really realize that I was Chinese and truly different living in the South, and where I was like one of two Chinese people in my school. I just, I look a little different. I didn't realize, because my parents were like, look, you're American. And that's who we were. And that's how we grew up. And we ate some strange things at home, and, the other people didn't eat at school. And sometimes we took them to school and I had to explain, what they were. But I think that ingrained in me this thing of like, I'm not different. I look different, but I'm the same as everyone else. And I can achieve and do the things that everyone else can do, even though in the work culture, people did not, look like me. And so I think that's the center of gravity that has driven me my entire life. And then I had 2 daughters. I still have them, 2 daughters who are 12 and 10. And I think becoming a parent also of 2 young girls really was the second thing that really catapulted me to say, hey, I want to make sure that I'm standing up, being inclusive, being sensitive. And it has really little to do with the leadership part of it, but more about the inclusive part of it, because my husband is Caucasian. So my kids, are half Chinese and half Caucasian. So they look a little bit different, right, than other folks. They don't totally look like me. They don't totally look like him. And so it really kind of came to light of like, hey, we really want to make sure that wherever we are, whether it's school, whether it's at work, whether it's shopping, at the grocery store, just make sure that you're being really sensitive to everyone and aware of how you show up wherever you are. And I think those are the 2 major things that really influenced me and continue to influence me to make sure that we're open-minded and being sensitive to everyone.
Thank you, Jen. I was very good timing. We didn't actually know you had that history. No, actually, we planned it the whole time. No. So next question is going to go to Martin. What do you want to see happen to have more advocacy for Asians in leadership roles?
Yeah, it's a good question. And before I answer, Jan, I like that you keep reminding folks you still have the kids, like they're still alive, they're still around. Like, anyway. I
have other thoughts about that at different times. Now you have 2.
Yeah. Exactly. They're both alive, like job complete. I think when I think about this, I don't really think about advocacy for Asians in particular in leadership roles. I do think about advocacy for having diversity in leadership roles, whether that's by gender, by ethnicity, by age, by, there's so many different properties, like, by experience. So, I definitely think about it more from a overall diversity as opposed to, in particular Asians in leadership roles. I think it really starts with 2 things. One is having the leaders in the company understand why diversity is so important, and not just diversity, like diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, like why that's important and what it does for a business. And, Anka said at the beginning, it's one of our priorities to make DEI be innate to who we are. And it's not just because it's, the right thing to do or we should do it. It's actually because there's plenty of evidence out there that that's what makes a much more high performing, better company, right? So I think it just begins with the understanding and the acceptance of that. And the way we go do that is through a lot of training. We have the whole exec team through ongoing diversity, inclusion and equity training. More than anything else, I think we're rolling that out to managers. I don't know if that's started yet, but I think that's rolling out to people managers in the company, and then eventually to everyone else, so that there is a core understanding for why this is important for us as a company. And I'd say we start there. We add on to that just, a good look at the data, because as Tricia said before, everybody has inherent biases. So, we really want to inspect what is actually happening in our data and really look at it with a clear lens. And Tricia knows this because she compiles all the data for us. But it's not just like, hey, what is the general, the ethnicity representation in the company, but everything we do. Like you can imagine, recently we went through performance and promotions. We looked at the performance broken down by gender, by ethnicity, right? We looked at the you know, and how we put the stat at the early at the beginning of this session, where there's 20% Asians in leadership roles. Like, we look at all these things, not because they're, I think, are specific goals. I think we're trying to, you know, obviously have a more diverse company overall, but just, I think, understanding and looking for any anomalies, right? You can imagine if we found that you know, a particular ethnicity or a particular gender was getting promoted at a higher rate, well, that's interesting and probably abnormal. There's probably something there. Like, let's go dive into it and really understand what is causing that, and perhaps providing more education there. I think, luckily to report, and Trisha, you can correct me here, you know the data better than I do. I think we're like, all the data I've seen, we've been pretty, like, I haven't seen many discrepancies, you know, across the ways that we've looked at our data, which, you know, I think, you know, speaks to the types of leaders and you know, the types of folks we have in the company here. But that's an ongoing process, you know, that we do there. You know, that's from I'd say, you know, a leadership position. I would say for managers in the company, you know, one thing that I recommend from when I was a manager was, and I think we're doing this here, I think it's like we do these enneagrams. I can't remember what they're called, but like, and it's not just for, you know, ethnicity, diversity reasons or anything like that. Is just, I think, understanding how each team member is, and, you know, I've done it with like Myers-Briggs before and things like that as well. I think having a good understanding of the folks on your teams and how they are wired personality wise, I guess, and using that as a way to sort of map that to perhaps what you see when you assess for, you know, performance, or when you look for, you know, opportunities to promote, right? So for one example, you know, if you have a team member and, you know, I think there's a particular Enneagram type, and they're the helpers, right? They're going to like help others before, you know, they do things for themselves. I think understanding that, and then using that lens to sort of think, okay, well, it's probably going to lead to this team member helping the team a lot more than just, you know, purely focusing on themselves and achieving individually. So how do you weigh that when you look at performance? How do you weigh that when you look at promotions? I think is a good way to, you know, perhaps just get more data and understand and you know, make decisions that way. And the last thing I'll say here, you know, is, you know, I'm glad we're starting to, you know, boot up these ERGs. You know, we've had Chrono Gals for a while, but now we have a lot more ERGs here. And I think that's a great way to also advocate for, you know, particular ethnicities or gender or and, you know, again, any other different properties there. Because I think, you know, having events like this where we can see Asian leaders in the company, right, and have them talk about their experience, I think that's a hugely valuable, you know, thing. I hope, you know, this is the first of many to come, and we don't have to restrict it to folks inside the company. I can imagine we can expand this to sort of, you know, prominent Asians, you know, in the industry or wider than that. So I think EIG is, again, a great place for advocacy there as well. All of that, I would say, is not specific to Asians in any particular way. And I don't think we think about it. I don't think about it in that way. It's more about just having sort of, you know, more diversity across the company overall.
Thank you, Martin.
Excellent. Thank you so much. A little education. Did you know McKinsey's Women in the Workplace study surveyed more than 400 large organizations across the United States in 2021 and found that Asian Americans account for only 9% of senior vice presidents, but just 5% of promotions from senior vice presidents to the C-suite were women. Asian American women make up less than 1% of these promotions. So women were only in 1% of these promotions, which is a little astonishing. And so my question to Trisha and to Martin is, Asian women make up an extremely low percentage of Asians in leadership. How can we improve these numbers for Asian Americans, Asian women across the board?
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one on first, Martin. So I know I'm the people data person, but I'm starting off this answer with, I have no actual data to support this, but from my experience, one factor I feel like we could take into consideration when trying to increase the number of Asian women in leadership positions is to understand like the familial complexities for some Asian women and provide those resources to help us navigate this pivotal point. From a very early age, many of us here, we're expected to take care of kids. Hopefully they're all alive, our parents, our in-laws, and we're supposed to strive to be successful in our professional life. This is like ingrained in us from a very early age. You can have family homes that have all of the different individuals in that physical space. You can be running around from point A to point B to get to them, to take care of them. That's taking care of a lot of people. You're burning the candle at not one, not two, but like numerous ends as an Asian woman in the workplace, it can feel like. And I'd love for us to explore options in creating like flexible workplace environment, employee boomerang programs. I know, similar to Jan, when I became a mom, I also took some time off. I have never been more grateful for when I was able to come back into the workplace. Additional benefits, whether they're financial or emotional, resources, any of that would be so helpful in navigating all of these different care points. And I think that's where, if we were to look at a funnel of why an Asian woman was trailing off of these like promotion, the promotion funnel, that would be the data that I would love to review and get into to understand. This is a hypothesis as to why that may be the case. Obviously, all of this I would take into consideration company goals, but that's like an observation I've had and would love to dig into further to see how we can improve these numbers.
Yeah, Trisha, I think that's a great point. And when I think of the E in DEI or DEIB, the image that pops to my head is there are people of different heights trying to look at something over the fence. And because of the different heights, they need a different sized box to stand upon in order to see that, right? And the size box is not the same. And that's, every time I think equity, it's that image that comes to mind. So it's less about equality and making sure everybody has there's a little bit of equality there. But I think to your point, it is diving into, not everyone has the exact same opportunities, and what can we do to ensure that more have that opportunity and an equal opportunity there. So, I think that's, again, for us, if the data would reveal that, this is the type of thing that we want to go look into, right? And I think this is the thing that has led here at Chronosphere into, us having family planning benefits and things like that, right? Just things that I think are geared towards ensuring, that there's more equity there. I think outside of that, when we look at the stats, the other, and like I'm an engineer by trade, I also think in numbers, the other thing that my mind goes to is like, what is even like, if we think about solving the broader problem here, like what is the number or percentage of Asian women entering into our industry, entering into tech even, right? Because you imagine if that percent is 5% and 5% of them are at the SVP level, then that to me says that, okay, there's like, the problem is really the pool of people entering the field is not diverse enough, right? As opposed to there is a problem in the promotion path along the way. I don't have the stats either, but that's where my analytical mind goes into, and I know we've thought about that in different diversity ways. If the pool of representation is low, then you're gonna have issues all the way throughout. So that leads me then to think about what can we do to sort of increase that. Perhaps again, I tend to scope these things down to like the space that we're in tech, right? Like how attractive is tech for an Asian woman to enter into and study at university? Are there things that we could do there to go help that? Like I noticed that and it was a program that the company was associated with for a few years, and I think they sort of shut down. It was Built by Girls, and it was essentially, we had employees go and volunteer their time to meet, I believe, high school students, thinking about what college degrees they wanted to go pursue, right? And it wasn't really trying to sell them in tech, but it was trying to sort of tell them like, hey, look, this is what a career in tech sort of looks like, and then trying to help them with their college applications and things like that. And I noticed, like, I think I participated maybe 4 or 5 times before the program shut down. And I noticed there was actually a lot of young Asian women there, right? And I think they had a lot of questions on like whether tech would be potentially a good career for them. So, my mind starts to think about, okay, well, on top of what Trisha said, like, hey, like, what is the overall pool and other things that we could be doing to solve that? Because that's probably a better longer term thing. I do worry, every time we try to optimize for just Chronosphere, because I feel like that's a zero-sum game, right? It's like if the pool is small, Chronosphere can do better, but the industry doesn't really, do better there. So.
Thank you both for that response. That was amazing. Trisha, to your list, I'd love to add one more thing, and that is we're also finding ourselves responsible for feeding the pets. So I've killed so many betta fish because I forgot that one item there. So thank you for the reminder.
Adding it on, adding the plants, so many things to take care of. Too many.
That's right. That's why I go with silk plants too. So that's excellent. So let's move on to our next question. We're actually going to skip these next two slides because of time, but so my apologies to our panelists. So we're going to move on to this next question, and this is for the entire panel. What advice would you give other Asians who want to be successful professionals or leaders someday? And let's start off with Trisha.
Sure thing. Build out network. Networking can help create a sense of community, belonging, and you'll never know how someone can support you or how you can support someone else on their journey. So that's the big thing for me.
Excellent. Joby?
I mean, totally agree with Trisha on that part. Networking is big. You need a set of people that you can always rely on and access for help. And as I said earlier, there's nothing to replace, anyone's work ethics and values, correct? I think that's very, very important. Be true to yourselves. If I may add, another, bit to it, it's around mentorship. I think that's really big. So have mentors who can help you grow both in your professional life and in personal life too, because you always need people to talk to about these things, even if it's personal, outside, your family and so on, correct? I mean, like, hey, because it's always a balance that we are all trying to, attain as part of that. Hey, failures and hurdles will be there. So if you are passionate about your goal, stay put. I mean, there's nothing, that should stop you there. So I think perseverance is the key. So I mixed up a couple of these things, but I think for me, all of them are equally important, if I might put it that way.
Excellent. Jen?
So I think there's two major pieces of advice I want to give. And I think the first one is you don't have to have the title to be a leader. You can be a leader no matter what you're doing, where you are within your team. And so don't wait for someone to dawn you with that title of leader or manager, director, or VP, etc. It's how you show up. It's all the things that Joby just said and Trisha have said too. You work hard, be authentic, be yourself. Don't apologize for being yourself. And I think the folks who can be the most human and be the most personable in terms of like, I am who I am, but also being self-aware about the places where you do have weaknesses and blind spots is super important. So I think it's the second thing is know thyself, know where you're strong, how you communicate, how you interact with other people, because that's what's going to set you up for success or potentially even failure as a leader. So those are the two most important things.
And Martin?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, I think we've heard it all from everybody here today, definitely having good mentors can go a long way. I think for mentors, I'd recommend finding somebody who's not in your direct management chain, because somebody outside of the, current situation is useful, gives you a different perspective. And I found often for mentors, it's mostly like, as I talk to them about a problem, like it's just another person who's a third party to the particular problem. And honestly, I find the solution just by talking about it, right? Just having somebody there talk to about it, I think goes a long way there. Joby mentioned a lot of hard work. I think just, whether you're an Asian or not, I think to be successful, it requires a lot of hard work and dedication there. And I think to what Jan said, I think a lot of hard work and perhaps, I think often we could sometimes get in our heads, well, did this happen because I'm Asian or whatnot, right? Whereas just sort of thinking hey, we're all different, right? And, perhaps having a little bit of faith that in the long run, the company would seek out, unconscious biases and things like that. And we should make sure that, that they won't exist, and sort of having that mentality of, we're all a little different, you're not going to get the promotion every time. It's not going to be a smooth path. I think all of our paths are sort of sideways at places, and that's just what it is for everybody, regardless of whether you're Asian or not, right? So it's sort of having that mentality, as opposed to perhaps more of a, I don't want to call it a victim mentality, but I think people can get in their heads a little bit about that sometimes, right? There, so I think we've heard it all here, and I think it's been some great advice from all the panelists today.
Definitely excellent advice. And just to, give you guys a heads up for our panelists, I'm inviting you all to my LinkedIn network just to expand and, get that conversation going to find a mentorship. And the other thing is the mentor does not have to be of Asian descent as well. You can certainly find allies and advocates that are not of Asian descent and give you that different perspective that can help you along the way as well. So
100%, Patty. And I would just add to that, just ask, right? One of my mentors is the CEO of HashiCorp. I'm like, that person's probably really busy, but if you don't ask, what's the worst thing that can happen? You ask and they say, oh, sorry, I'm a little busy, right? Just ask. You never know. So
that's perfect. Thank you so much. Ankur?
Yeah. All right. Thanks. And I know we've actually got a couple of minutes here. I just wanted to go a little off script here, maybe open it up to the audience, see if there are any questions. We do have maybe 2 or 3 minutes, so we can maybe take 1 or 2 questions for the panelists if anyone's got anything out in the audience. I'll give it about 10 seconds here to see if someone can frantically type something in. All right, no worries. We will move on here. So I just wanted to thank all of our panelists, Joby, Trisha, Jan, Martin, for taking this time out of your day today and sharing your thoughts with us. It has been super helpful. I know personally for me, and I'm sure for everyone else as well. And for those that may not know, Martin and his family just welcomed a new baby to their household. So an extra special thank you, Martin, for taking some precious time out of your, I'm sure, extremely busy schedule right now. So
of course, no worries. And I have 2 kids to keep alive. So, double the pressure.
You'll see the struggle that I have, Martin.
Yes. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. And then also, just as another quick reminder, there'll be a panel survey going out. Please do fill that out. That's the way that we can get feedback from you all as to how this was and how we can make it better in the future. And again, a little plug for tomorrow, 10 a.m. Pacific, Chronosapiens Trivia. There may be some prizes associated with that. I don't know. Show up, you'll find out. And Celestine, kick it over to you.
Thanks, Ankur. Thank you, panelists, again for your time. I just wanted to highlight our Chrono Cares program through Percent Pledge. We're really excited and happy to match up to $100 per person for donations towards our AAPI cause portfolio until June 15th. So just wanted everyone to be aware of this donation matching program. Log into Percent Pledge via Okta to support. And these are the 4 organizations that are in the portfolio. So a little on the cause portfolios, whenever you do donate, it will go into these 4 organizations equally. And yeah, thank you so much to everyone for attending, and I'll pass it back to Ankur.
Awesome. Attendees, thank you all so much for attending and your support of Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month here at Chronosphere. And Celestine and Seth, thank you so much for making this celebration and ERG at Chronosphere possible. There is no way we could have done this without your support. So appreciate it. And once again, panelists, thank you so much. Obviously, without you, we would not have been able to have this. Really appreciate it.